Never shall innocent blood be shed, yet the blood of the wicked shall flow like a river. The three shall spread their blackened wings and be the vengeful striking hammer of God. You people have been chosen to reveal our existence to the world. You will witness what happens here today, and you will tell of it later. All eyes to the front. You must watch, dear. It'll all be over soon.
Now you will receive us. We do not ask for your poor or your hungry. We do not want your tired and sick.
It is your corrupt we claim.
It is your evil that will be sought by us.
With every breath, we shall hunt them down.
Each day, we will spill their blood till it rains down from the skies.
Do not kill, do not rape, do not steal. These are principles which every man of every faith can embrace.
These are not polite suggestions. These are codes of behavior. And those of you that ignore them will pay the dearest cost.
There are varying degrees of evil. We urge you lesser forms of filth, not to push the bounds and cross over into true corruption, into our domain.
For if you do, one day you will look behind you and you will see we three. And on that day, you will reap it.
And we will send you to whatever God you wish.
And shepherds we shall be, for thee, my Lord, for thee. Power hath descended forth from thy hand. Therefore may swiftly carry out thy command. So we shall flow river forth to thee, and teeming with souls shall it ever be.
In nomine Patri.
Et Filii, Spiritus Sancti.
How far are we going to take this, Star?
The question is not how far. The question is, do you possess the Constitution? The depth of faith to go as far as is needed?
They exited out the front door. They had no idea what they were in for. Now they're staring at 6 men with guns drawn. It was a fucking ambush. This was a fucking bomb dropping on Beaver Cleaverville. For a few seconds, this place was Armageddon. There was a firefight!
Son of a bitch!
Hey guys.
Hey, Nick. How you doing?
Oh, we're missing the old man here.
Yeah, he'll be along in about 10, 15 minutes, he said.
Yeah, he kind of shows up later in that movie too, so that's all right.
Yeah, I had some fun with my video editing software there, and so we put together a bit longer of an intro. And apparently we need it because of Steve, so we're gonna have to give him some shit later tonight.
He'll tell us to pull our heads out of our own, you know what? So,
Probably.
oh, guys, morality is inevitable. Tonight is about the inevitability of morality. It's actually kind of like our second take on the morality of the red pill. We deny that it is an amoral praxeology. Nor is it just merely a praxeology. But we'll get into that later.
Yes, I have many many examples, and we're even gonna have some fun with science. So, but that's for
We'll have
later.
lots of fun. Yeah, we're going to have lots of good stuff here tonight. But let's just go with an informal definition. I'll just pop it out there and open. Maybe you can answer off the cuff. What is the red pill?
I would say that the red pill is a collection of observations about in our particular space, intersexual dynamics. That could be dating, that could be that can be being married. Obviously, being married has a huge intersexual component to it. However, I want to go a little bit further, and I want to say it is not possible to observe something without that observation affecting your choices. Ask any man who's been involved in the red pill or who's even looked at red pill content. Okay. And they will tell you, yes, I make different choices now. Even the people who hate us in the red pill, they're reacting to us. They're reacting to our observations. They really don't like our observations, but there is the central thesis of tonight, if I were to state it, would be there is no action in absence of morality.
Right, yeah. Morality is inevitable. So there's laws of logic, there's laws of nature, metaphysics, laws of morality. So epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics, which will be proven to be shown, are, of course, distinct categories, yet they are also subcategories of one another. To talk about one means you have to include the other two. There is no pure epistemology with a make-believe world or a world that doesn't exist. And you can't make choices and decisions based on logic without a certain world and ethics. To even try to logic an argument means that you even have a purpose behind it, that right is right and wrong is wrong. You know, lies are bad and truth is good.
Well, you said something interesting there. Even trying to argue something and logic it, why do you care? What is driving you to care to invest the time in defending a position or attacking a position? Why do you care? What is driving you to decide to get out your keyboard and start spurg posting on Twitter? Or, in our case, yelling into microphones? Why do you guys do that?
Oh, they want a red pill, man. You know, the whole idea of the red pill is you have the blue pill, which is go along with falsehood and fantasy or accept the truth. And it's usually understood to accept the truth is good.
Okay.
But we're not all cipher here and want to take the blue pill and, you know.
Well, the blue pill has its advantages, and in the movie, The Matrix, Cypher even talks about the advantages. Like, he knows that the Matrix is a lie, right? He knows,
Mhm.
but there is a certain comfort to that lie. And he talks about it, it's like, I know the food I'm eating isn't real, but it still tastes good all the same. Like in the Matrix, you can live lives of relative comfort compared to the life he was living on board the ship, fighting the war, right? And look, fighting wars is hard work. So why do you fight?
Oh. There's no. It's not for morality, is it? There's no morality involved there, is it? Whether that's for power, money, righteous war,
Well,
protect your
I guess
homeland.
the answer to that question would be, do you think that morality is a result of action? Reality's effect, not cause? I don't know, Nick. Am I stepping off the reservation there? Because some people sure
It's
talk
not.
like it. That's how it works.
It's involved in every step of the way because the cause itself, because morality has to come from somewhere.
Right. So where does it come from?
Do you really want me to answer that question at 12 minutes? I can do that. My name's Nick, Christianity Unplugged. Yes, I believe in God, and I believe God is the one who provides us with a perfect standard of morality.
Say, yeah, we're 13 minutes in. You can say that. I won't stop you.
And he's the uncaused cause, right? I mean, he's more than that, but sure.
Well, when we were discussing this episode last night, it was actually Steve, who is being tardy today, who brought up the concept of the uncaused cause, and the science that I'm going to get into later tonight. We're actually going to look at the uncaused cause and how that creates all these problems for the amoralists, but that's for later. So,
Right. And for our natural law guys, that a lot of what I'm talking about is going to follow from natural law and philosophy. But reminder, we've talked about natural law a few times here on the Resurgence, and I'll be using this book I have here, and they state natural law is said to be an order or rule of human conduct which is based upon the divinely created human nature and which is normative for all human beings. Okay, so God designed us a certain way, and therefore we do things that are good for human nature according to his mandate. Also, is the mind itself only care about pure logical data when it analyzes data? No.
I would interject that the existence of women refutes that idea. I'm the married one of the group. I have to live with this every day.
Feels before reals, guys. Oh, that's the red pill truth. Oh, man.
There he is.
Oh,
Join us.
better late than never.
Yeah, fashionably late.
I guess.
We were just mentioning you and your uncaused cause that we're going to get into later tonight.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna read a rather lengthy quote. Now, comes from the 19th century analysis. There's a couple quotes here before I get into fourfold causation. And it says, according to Hodge, that's Charles Hodge, who's famous Princeton Seminary professor in 19th century. He was contemporary of Robert Louis Dabney. but he's in the North. And he's still a good guy. According to Hodge, the word motive can be defined in both objective and subjective sense. In an objective sense, the word refers to something that is outside the self and which awakens desire and affection, therefore, thereby moves the agent to an action or decision. In a subjective sense, the word refers to those inward convictions, feelings, inclinations, and principles which are in the mind itself and which impel or influence the man to decide one way rather than another. When the word motive is defined in the subjective sense, i.e., the sense that explicitly denies the understanding the will can act independently of one another in moral activity, it becomes immediately clear that the moral quality of a voluntary act is determined by the character of the acting agent, because it is the character of the acting agent that determines what is most preferable to the mind in the moment of acting or choosing. There is no such thing, Hodge argues, as a purely intellectual cognition of a moral truth. It is the exercise of a moral nature. It implies moral sensibility. It of necessity involves feeling to a greater or less degree. It is the cognition of a being sensitive to moral distinctions, and without that sensibility, there can be no such cognition. Okay. And I'll go to another quote towards the end here. He says, both objective and subjective factors are involved in the process of knowing. To vastly oversimplify the matter, while modernists are convinced that objective truth can be known only when, quote, personal and subjective factors are eliminated from the knowing process, and while postmodernists are convinced that objective truth cannot be known precisely because personal and subjective factors are an essential component of each and every attempt to know. Advocates of right reason, that would be me, recognize that although knowing does in fact involve the kinds of personal and subjective factors that many modernists naively presume have little, if anything, to do with our attempts to know, this does not mean that a more or less objective apprehension of reality is beyond our reach. So the mind doesn't operate on a purely distinctive, this is pure logic. No, that when the brain receives these things, and we're not just merely psychological monisms, we're body and soul in one person. It's much more complicated than that. Feelings are involved, motives are involved, history is involved, behavioral patterns are involved, and preferment is involved. And like Plutarch said, we know this because we know women feels before reals.
Well, and look, I want to go back to that because think about how difficult it is to convince men to think rationally and logically. Okay. We know men can do it. We've seen men do it, right?
Yes,
But it is hard labor for men to think rationally and logically. It is not their natural state. You look like you have something to say, Steve.
Okay.
I do. I was just thinking of something that's been perverted in the Catholic Church. You know, in the nature of sin. The modern church or progressive Catholics say, well, they tell us to follow our conscience. The more traditional minded, the older school is, no, it's a well-formed conscience that you should follow, not just a conscience. So there is some act of, it's applying discipline, it's your upbringing. It's actually work to have a well-formed conscience instead of just following a conscience, which is more or less a whim.
Well, man did what book has that refrain? We've talked about this before of the Bible. Man did what was right in his own eyes.
Aren't there more than
Book of
one?
Judges.
I was gonna say,
Book of
aren't there more
Judges.
than one books that say something like that?
Yeah, well, the heart is deceitful above all things. Who can know it? Do we really understand all the crap that's going on in our brain and how much of that is on a subconscious level that we don't even know about?
Oh, now there's a question. It's really hard to determine what's going on at a subconscious level, but if you break it down in the psychology sense, there's your conscious, subconscious, and then what Jung called the id, or what you can be called your autonomic system, right? Um, like there is base level programming in humans that kicks in before your conscious brain even realizes what the hell is going on. Okay. Don't tell me that stuff doesn't exist. It's
Maybe
there.
it's good for you to breathe, right? And your heart to beat. That's good
Uh,
for life. Hmm.
Generally, yes.
Hmm, hmm.
Okay.
Kind of like an innate moral principle in design. Hmm. Okay. Just saying.
So, I mean, who can know the subconscious? Look, you don't even know your subconscious completely. You don't. And you're lying to yourself if you think you do. So, the conscious mind is where all logic happens. But that is high level, that's slow thinking. That's there is lots of things are going to happen before your conscious mind catches up. So clearly there is more to life than logic, even for men.
They don't they kind of teach that in special forces? That, an example is, okay, you're out in the wilderness and you're stranded. Which way should you go? Well, they kind of say, you know what? You got to follow your gut instinct. Yeah, I mean, obviously you're going to be thinking too. But if you overthink it, you're probably doing too much, because there's some things going on in your brain that you're not conscious of. And sometimes you just have to follow your gut, which might be good advice.
One of the things that I learned from my my special forces firearms trainers was this concept of so we would do these hostage drills, and there is actually a trick to recognizing the hostage from the hostage taker, and the trick is you have to. So most people, they're looking through the sight, and they're zeroed in on the sight, and they're paying attention, and their brain is on. The trick is pull your sight back away from the sight, the gun sight, and open it up. My instructor loved to do this thing where he'd have us all raise our weapons to a fighting stance, and then underneath where we can't see, he'd pull out a knife, just down by his waist. And his point is you have to be paying attention to you have to step back and say, okay, what's going on here,
So there's a limit of perception, but also you need to. Well, we'll get to that. I'm going to go to this fourfold causation, since I've been yammering on about that. I was finally going to get to it. We talked about natural law, talked about logic, talked about inevitability and morality. But right before I get it,
Well,
the
guys, just
design.
for the audience, I just want to note something here. Nick has been wanting to do this fourfold causation thing for over a month now. So we're just gonna get out of his way and let him cook for a bit.
there's a foundational question I do want to ask right before I jump in. So, is purpose itself moral?
Yes.
Trying to achieve an end and doing what you can to achieve that end has a, depending on how close you get to achieving that end, it is either good, bad. The quality of achieving that purpose could either good or bad, or were you able to achieve that purpose, or the fact that you even have a purpose is a moral decision. Implies a morality. So there's fourfold causation. I asked that question because that is actually the background to the argument, which I'm going to use about the so-called amorality of the red pill. So fourfold causation, you just think back to Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas. There's four things: material cause, efficient cause, formal cause, and final cause. The material cause refers to that which of a thing is made or composed. The efficient cause refers to the proximate agent or event which brought about the thing in question. The formal cause refers to the nature or essence of the thing. The final cause refers to the reason of the thing, the purpose for which the thing exists, the ultimate end, basically. So, fourfold causation of the red pill. So, the material cause, what is it made up of? It's data, basically. The data that's based on human behavior, intersexual dynamics, observation. That's the material cause. What's the efficient cause? Again, the efficient cause is the proximate agent or event which brought about the thing in question. Well, you have people like Rollo, Roosh, Pook, Dalrock, Rich Cooper, through blogs, social media, YouTube, where the guys have they've gathered, they've observed, they've gathered, interpreted data, and pushed it out to the public. So you have the material cause, you have the efficient cause, and we move on to the formal cause, which is, again, the nature, essence of the thing. So what is the red pill, basically? It's data and advice to men, sexual strategies for men.
Would
The
best
formal
practices fall in that category?
but that involves a moral decision. It could be that. I don't deny that. But what is best? It involves a moral criterion. But yeah, sure. I wouldn't have a problem with that. So dad advice to men, sexual strategies for men, best practices for men. Now, here's the thing that they don't want to admit is the final cause. Now, before I get to the final cause, I'll put a note here that we sent a note in this book that talks about the relation of the formal and final cause. It says, we see then that the nature of a thing will be its formal cause. It is also worth noting that the final cause and the formal cause of a thing are so closely related that the formal cause of a thing always seems to be conceived in the terms of that thing's final cause, its end, its purpose. It follows then that the nature of a thing seems to include its final cause. So you want to help men. Oh, no, data advice to men, sexual strategies for men, best practices is a formal cause. Why? For what purpose? What end? Oh, well, I think Rollo said it once, helping men one life at a time, saving man's life one at a time. That's one of them, I guess. I think that's a good final cause. But I think in more in general, that could be like a secondary cause, secondary final cause, I guess. There could be possibly more than one, depending on the exact actor. But in general, I would say to help men with women with the truth, or via the truth. To help men with women via the truth.
I would just take it, help men achieve sexual union, sexual intercourse. Okay, the formal cause, I mean, in the bigger picture, what's the purpose of that? Procreation, furthering the human race. But whether it's done morally or immorally, basically sexual intercourse in within a marriage, long-term permanent, or short-term sequential, it's still what they're seeking. And the sexual intercourse in itself is a good thing because
Right.
that was one of the
Right.
commandments. Go forth,
It's,
be fruitful, and multiply. Okay, so God
it's
wants
human
us.
nature.
Exactly, it is. Now it can be twisted. I'm not saying
Yes,
it
it can.
can't be,
Yes, it can.
but still, that is that's what leads us to procreation, furthering the human race, creating another soul. That is a good. That's a moral good.
Yeah. So in general, I think the red pill has a lot of moral good, and they actually do moral good with insofar that they're using the truth, gathering data, exchanging notes, using observation, etc., and seeing what works to help men with women. So it's also moral good in how that they're able to carry that out, but also the ultimate cause, the final cause, sorry, is also still moral, but I actually think it's a moral good, like you said, Steve. Good job.
Yeah. And it's not just about sex. You want to have
No, it's not just
men want
merely.
to have a relationship with a woman. They want it to go well. They want to have peace. They want to have respect from the woman. They want to provide and for their wife and children and leave a legacy. I mean, it's more. There's more to life than just sexual intercourse, obviously, and men know that, and they're not choosing sexual intercourse above everything else. At least not most of the time. Maybe some of the
That's
time.
part of the problem. That's part of the problem with some of the PUA stuff in the RP is so many get burned out because they I that's their ultimate purpose is something so really.
It's not inherently bad. It's just it is not. I mean, sex isn't inherently bad. It's just what they're doing doesn't. They want more, and they want more than that, and they realize that they are not going to get it using those tools. I mean, look, some of the famous PUA guys, Pook, gone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And this is my problem is this is what they're my criticism of some of the RP right now is they've actually gone away from their formal and final cause. And I've actually in practice, even though intellectually they may not admit it, they're promoting a different formal and final cause. And I'll put that on the stage here. Yes, you can laugh a little bit, guys. Boats and hoes. Boats and hoes. I gotta have me my boats and hoes. And you wonder why they unplug from that and they say, man, that's not really what I want, and it's not really attainable, it's not really realistic, and they kind of leave the RP.
You mean the people who show up, find some good, and then the message doesn't quite satisfy? No, I don't want boats and hoes. I want something more than that. But that's all they see being promoted. I'm probably exaggerating here, but nevertheless, that's all the message these guys get, and they leave.
Well, and
We're not Ubermensch enough.
well, it's not just that though. It's just men. There's two competing problems here. We've discussed the first one. Men want more than that. Okay, but there's another problem here, and that problem is that in order to justify amorality and the amoral message, you have to use the same tactics that feminism uses. You have to use the same, I hesitate to call them logical pathways, because they're not logical, but they represent a tree of thinking that you arrive at your destination. And so men come into the red pill, see guys saying, using the constructs, the mental constructs of feminism, they can't articulate that that's what they're seeing. They don't understand it, but they look at that and go, that's really familiar to what I just got done hearing from my bitchy wife. Yeah, it's good. It sounds good for me because I'm the man, but it's no, the construct isn't any different than what she's saying. And I can't beat her at her own game. So, I'll just move on to something else.
It's actually demoralization. Not demoralization.
Yeah, it's one of the methods of demoralization.
Now, did we want to move on to the science stuff, or did we want Steve to talk about, you and Plutarch to talk about ideology and praxeology?
I don't know.
Steve, do you
when
want
is
that?
an ideology not an ideology? Oh, that would be when it's a praxeology.
Okay, but there's a logic problem here.
Wait, well, what is an ideology and what is a praxeology?
Okay, I'm going to answer you, and I'm going to read the Merriam-Webster definitions, the modern definitions. I know, Nick, it's not your preferred, but everyone's using the modern definitions today, so I'm going to use those. Ideology, the science of ideas. That is the Merriam-Webster definition of ideology.
Okay.
Praxeology, the study of human action or conduct. That's it.
Can I have a human action or conduct without having an idea of what I'm doing?
No.
So if you have a praxeology, you still have to have an ideology, right?
I would state it as praxeology is a subset of ideology. All praxeology is ideology, but not all ideology is praxeology.
And they say praxeology is amoral?
Yeah, because that would be your what you do. Wait a minute. I just thought of something. Don't listen to what she says, watch what she does. When we watch what she does, that indicates who she is and what kind of woman she is. So actions represent morality. So if a how can you have an amoral praxeology?
Well, amorality doesn't exist. But anyways, a convenient cop out, stop the cat.
Well, and to that point, the point that amorality doesn't exist, I'm not going to call it a formal proof, but we are going to do a rigorous examination of why there is no such thing as amorality. And
fourfold causation already denies it.
Yes, but that is an immaterial logic, and Nick knows what I'm referring to.
Oh, do I need to play that now or later?
No, you can play that later. But it turns out that there's an actual physics explanation for this. And the empiricists, particularly in the physics space, are struggling mightily with this explanation. they to the point where the atheist wing has kind of just said, well, it is what it is. We can do no better than this. It's actually a stunning admission that there are limits to empiricism. And actually, why don't we just dive down that rabbit hole just a little bit? Okay, I'm going to add this to the stage here. This is Neil deGrasse Tyson, an astrophysicist, talking to Joe Rogan about the observer effect. And I'm going to play this, and Steve or Nick, tell me if you can't hear it.
Illuminate this often misused explanation for the observer effect.
So I'm looking at you. The only reason why I can see you is because there's light reflecting off of your face, your body, into my eyes. Now, let's make you tinier. Let's make you mini me. I turn on the lights, you're still there. Because if the lights are not on, I can't see you. I don't know where you are. When you start becoming the size of molecules, right on down to the size of an atom, and I ask the question, where is Joe Rogan the atom? And I turn on the light to see you there. The light, the photon comes in, hits your atom, and pops you into another location. The very act of trying to measure your position prevents me from measuring your position. And it doesn't have jack shit to do with your consciousness or your mind or your eyes.
Okay. It has jack shit to do with your consciousness or your mind or your eyes. And this ends up being a key point, because if you listen to what he said was the photon hits the electron and knocks it into a different position. Okay. Now, in order to determine where that photon or that electron is, I have to hit it with another photon. And then that knocks it into a new position. So all observation occurs in the past. Okay. I am always ever looking at the way something was, and we do not have a mathematics to predict where that electron is going to end up. But we can infer, and infer is going to be a huge word for us.
Ooh.
We can infer that the electron was in one place. We hit it with another photon, and now we know it's over there, and we can infer that it traveled in between those 2 points. Okay, this is physics. This is physics measuring the smallest of the particles, the smallest building blocks of the universe, and saying we cannot predict where that will go when we try to measure it. And every time we cannot fully measure this with there is no physical way to measure the universe to a perfect level. There is, and what this really boils down to is there is no such thing as perfect knowledge in this universe. And this is what the empiricists have been struggling with. Because
you mean they're not God?
Well, they're not. Okay. Because
imagine that.
I mean, we could even get into the fact that it's well known that your brain is reconstructing the image of your eyes. So to measure this electron, we have to have a very expensive tool that can bounce photons off of electrons. And then we can put that up on a screen, and then our eyes have to see on the screen what's going on. So there are many steps in the process of determining this, but we have determined it. And so the empiricists cannot account for the in-between.
Is that my cue or later?
Go for it.
You still there?
Yeah.
Go for it. Okay. Well, this is coming at it from not quite an empirical perspective, but it's involved in empiricism. But it's more about the God of in between. Oh, it talks about laws of logic. Yeah, I'll present that. Share screen. Uh-oh. And I got to put it present. There we go. Add a stage. There we go.
Answered in the very same way? No, they are not. They're answered by the use of certain methods, though, that are the same. Reason, logic, and presenting evidence. Right. I heard you mention logical binds and logical self-contradictions in your speech. Mm-hmm. You did say that? I said it. I used that phrase, yes. Do you believe there are laws of logic, then? Absolutely. Are they universal? They're agreed upon by human beings. They aren't laws that exist out in nature. Are they simply conventions, then? They're conventions, but they're conventions that are self-verifying. Are they sociological laws or laws of thought? They are laws of thought which are interpreted by men and promulgated by men. Are they material in nature? How can a law be material? That's the question I'm going to ask you. I would say no.
Dr. Stein, now you have an opportunity to cross-examine Dr. Bonson.
Dr. Bonson, would you call God material or immaterial? Immaterial. What is something that's immaterial? Something not extended in space. Can you give me an example of anything other than God that's immaterial? Laws of logic.
And there you go.
So the key point that got the audience reaction was the laws of logic are immaterial.
They're objective and universal. Yeah.
Correct.
If you can't say laws of logic are objective and universal, then what's the point of arguing?
Well, I know some French Nietzsche structuralists who are desperate to try to make this true. But so the Nietzsche structuralists use a bit of a twist on this play, and when this interview was, or when this debate was done, this was not as well known. This is Foucault and Derrida. Their view is, well, if we cannot change the laws of logic, then because the laws of logic are universal, then maybe what we need to do instead is we need to change the meaning of words so that the logic now fits the words that we're using.
Ah, sophistry. Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Yes. But in order for the universe to function, the laws of logic have to be universal, and they have to be immutable, unchangeable.
It's truth. Oh,
Correct.
so man, there's this immaterial, objective, universal truth that they don't want to have to wrestle with because they would be accountable to the God who also made everything and who is also moral. Hence, we derive our morality and created us as moral creatures. Yeah, I can see where that would be a problem for some.
Well, it's Tacticus actually. I'm going to pull this up. It's funny you mentioned Kaizen, Tacticus, because we were discussing Kaizen in terms of this problem. How do you defeat somebody who has an amoralist, or how do you defeat somebody on the concept of morality and God? You just sit there and you ask them why. Why do females behave this way? Well, because it's necessary for biology. Okay, okay. Why is it necessary for biology? Well, because we need to procreate. Why do we need to procreate? Well, So it either turns into this little loop that they can't get out of, or you can expand it back to, well, because the universe was created. Why was the universe created? Clearly it was created. We inhabit it. So you can't argue that it isn't real. So why was the universe created? What was the cause that caused this universe to come into being?
Something happened. That's right. To the Big Bang, there was nothing. Then something happened. Bang, and the universe appeared. But wait a minute. That would mean something came from nothing. That doesn't make any sense. That would mean there's a cause, but it wasn't caused. There's an uncaused cause. Yes, I've heard that. The atheists say, yes, it was an uncaused cause. Uh-huh.
Well, they just leave it there.
Why?
Well, because how the atheist, the argument I've typically heard is, well, we cannot know because that cause was caused before there was a universe to measure the cause. Okay, so all you've done is admit that my prior assertion is correct, that there are things that humanity cannot measure. There are limits to what you can empirically determine.
Imagine that.
So what you have to be saying instead is, well, okay, so there's the uncaused cause of the Big Bang. There's the inference problem of the electron and the photon. So there's all these things that it is physically impossible for us to measure. And the empiricists will say yes, but that's just is what it is. We can't do anything about it. Them's the rules. Oh, there's rules? There's a structure to the universe. There's an order to the universe. Why did that structure come about? Random chance and a happy accident?
Right. Yeah, John Frame talks about empiricism. He says, if we consistently follow an empirical approach to knowledge, we would have to abandon many claims to knowledge that otherwise we would make without hesitation. Empiricism cannot justify a general proposition such as all men are immortal or F equals ma. Such general propositions always go beyond anything we can observe because they encompass the whole universe. Similarly, the propositions of logic and mathematics, propositions that claim to be universally true, cannot be established on an empirical basis. Empiricism cannot justify any statements about the future, for no one has known the future by sense experience. And so empiricism cannot justify scientific prediction. Thus, we must either drastically limit the scope of what we call knowledge or else abandon empiricism. As Hume pointed out, empiricism cannot justify any statement about ethical values. Statements about sensible facts do not imply anything about ethical goodness or badness, right or wrong, or obligation or prohibition. But as we've seen above, he says epistemology is a subdivision of ethics, and knowledge depends on our adoption and use of ethical values. If empiricism cannot justify the language about empirical values, then it cannot justify any claim to knowledge. Therefore, empiricism cannot justify empiricism. For empiricism is a view of how one ought, there you go, an ethical ought, he says, to justify his beliefs. And on an empiricist basis, we cannot justify from sense experience the proposition that we ought to justify our beliefs in that way. Empiricism also rules out claims to know God. If God is thought to be invisible or otherwise resistant to empirical checking procedures for some empiricists, the fact Fact rules out the knowledge of God. For Christians, it rules out empiricism as a general theory of knowledge. There you go.
So I want to point something out here. These systems of morality. Christianity is a system of morality, right?
Yeah, morality is inevitable.
Right.
But yes, it's a system of morality.
And so going back to my physics experiment, we have to make an inference that the electron jumped from point A to point B. We can never measure that jump. We have to infer it. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. We use something called a heuristic. And in this case, we use a logical heuristic. And that logic heuristic is if I measure something in point A and then I subsequently measure something in point B, clearly that thing took some path to get from point A to point B. That is the inference that we're talking about. It's a logical, rational inference. Okay. Moralities are heuristics. They are a system of morality is a way to say doing this thing is bad for you, so you should not do it. Now, this does not mean that humans are never going to do that thing. Obviously, we live in a world full of drunkenness and
false sin. Yeah.
Right. Okay. But the other thing that the morality does is says, here is the result of you doing that. And this is why you should not do that thing. Okay. It is a heuristic. It is a behavioral heuristic. The universe, it demands heuristics because there is no perfect knowledge. And morality systems are simply heuristics at their most base level. It is this thing is bad. This thing will have a bad outcome for you. And so you probably don't want to do that. Or sometimes the morality system could be, this thing is a good outcome. We should do that. Oh, like maybe restraining female sexuality? Maybe, possibly.
Yeah, it takes a village.
So-
It takes a village to restrain a woman.
It sounds like you're talking about cause and effect.
Yeah, indeed, I am.
It's
When
involved.
there's a cause through heuristics and inference, we can imagine what the effect would be.
Yes.
We don't have to observe it. We don't have to see it with perception. We can infer it using logic, which implies a morality that exists outside of experience.
I would go so far as to say it can only exist outside of experience because I myself never experienced that thing. I must rely on, in this case, in the case of drunkenness, it could be the experience of somebody else saying, you know what, this could happen if you do this.
So so even the empiricists make so many assumptions on the studies and inferences and reliability of ancient history, biology, psychology, physics, without necessarily themselves having studied them and experienced them themselves. Because you just can't study everything.
Right. You cannot have perfect knowledge of the universe. In this universe, it is not possible to have perfect knowledge of this universe. Now,
God exists also outside the universe, but sure, he has perfect knowledge. There you go.
Right. Okay. So God would have to exist outside the universe. Why? The uncaused cause.
In it.
Well,
he's in it, but he's not contained by it. Sure.
Right. Well, that's the phrase I used in our planning meeting for this one was the God of the in-between.
Right.
God lives in between moments. The smallest measurement you can take is not small enough to measure God. The smallest measurement you can take of two electrons or of an electron as it moves through space is not small enough to measure God, because God lives in between any possible moment you could measure. So he is omnipresent in the universe, and yet he is also outside of it. Science is fun, by the way, and this might surprise people to know, but there are many, many Christian physicists out there. Quite a few episodes ago, I talked about how the entire mass of the universe would equate to a ball of water 500 million light years wide. That calculation came from a Christian physicist who was actually trying to work out, like how this might work in a way. Yeah, Chief, exactly. God cannot resolve inside creation. Exactly.
He's in it, but he's not contained within it.
Well, I like the
yeah.
word resolve, because it's like no matter how high resolution camera you have, you cannot take a picture of God, right?
In whom we move, live, and have our being. Yeah.
So let me kind of go back to something that we touched on. The reason guys leave the red pill. And you kind of said, gee, it's because they see ultimately the red pill kind of is the same as feminism. Let me point something out. In the red pill, the old red pill, not so much recently, but we talked about rationalization, women's attempts to rationalize things, basically to avoid accountability. And we talked about the rationalization hamster. Oh, yeah, she's always spinning a narrative that explains and excuses and allows her to do what she wants to do and then justify it. Okay, well, without morality, if you just have best practices or a praxeology, or, oh, women are this way, modern women are this way, they're unfit, they're not wife material, therefore, I should be a man of high value in spin plates and whatever. You just engaged in a rationalization, which is basically a tenet of the red pill that women rationalize. We don't like that, but now you're just doing that. Yes, okay, you're responding to the current situation. Is that the proper response?
Well, no, there's a proper response. Morality.
Oh, yes. Are you saying between the observation and the action, there's an in-between that should involve morality?
It always does.
Well, what caused you to act in one way versus another? What was the driving impetus? Okay, you decided to spin plates. Okay, we accept that. That is a valid strategy. Why did you decide to do that? What caused that? What confluence of incoming information from the red pill caused you to take that particular action? Because it isn't just the information. Men all over the world get the same information, the exact same information, and then they go MGTOW. So clearly, the information itself cannot produce a reproducible outcome. Okay, the outcome of pure information is not guaranteed. There was some other thing that happened that causes some men to go MGTOW, causes some men to go spin plates, and causes some men to say, well, I'm married, I have a moral obligation to that marriage, So I am going to take these red pill truths and I'm going to apply them to improving my marriage. That does happen.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know what else happens in the red pill sometimes? Men turn around and leave. Oh, another thing that happens, we get attacked by people all the time. What
Yeah.
drove them to attack us?
Steve, this is one of your favorite phrases, I think. Something about what's the real problem?
The descriptors? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, the truth?
It's the truth. It's not the decision based on the truth that they're having a problem with. They're in outright denial of the truth. No, you shouldn't see things that way. Because that's not how they ought to be. You should see things how they ought to be, not as how they are. It's oh, gee, you have a problem with the truth before you even have a problem with what I decide to do with this knowledge.
Well, and what are they doing? They are also in that statement, they are trying to say that I have a problem with your description. Well, where did that problem come from? This is just data. Why do you have a problem with data? What morality framework drove you to act and get in my face on the internet, in real life, and say, and yes, I have had very fractious interactions in real life over the red pill.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. What drove those people to get in your face and say, and tell me that I'm wrong? Tell me that I should not be doing this. That I shouldn't believe.
I've had those too. They rarely, maybe almost never, really argue with your actions. They argue with your observations.
Mm-hmm.
They say, no, what you see, that's not really true. The hell it isn't. That is true. But in their mind, they're saying, if that's true, you're going to do this. Therefore, I'm going to ignore the truth and say you're wrong and get mad at you for believing the truth and telling me the truth.
Hey, Steve, you hit on something very, very important. And as you were saying it, it just flew through my head. You said the reason they have a problem with the truth, with the descriptions, is because they are extrapolating what you're going to do with that truth. And they're going to say, oh, that's bad. So, for example, I've talked about this before. I had a relative of mine come to me and say, and very emotionally ask why I don't have kids. And I gave the explanation. And it was a logical, rational explanation based on all the data that I have collected throughout my life, including a lot of data from the red pill about divorce statistics and the divorce courts, and of course, working with Nick and listening to his story and his ongoing story, and saying, I want no part of this. Okay. I laid all of that out. And I was literally told that all of that does not matter because having kids is good. And therefore,
having kids is good.
Having kids is good. But I am supposed to ignore all of the information. I'm supposed to ignore everything that the world is going to do to those kids.
You made a choice.
I made a choice on the basis of data. That choice has moral consequences. I am not sitting here saying that my choice is some sort of high-minded morality. I'm not saying that. But it goes to Steve.
That nobody else can have kids either. You're just saying, hey, that's the choice I made based on the data.
That's correct. But it gets
to Steve's. You're not saying that other people need to make the same choice you made.
Correct. But this person was so incensed that I could use data to arrive at a conclusion that they did not like because it did not fit their moral framework. And so their problem.
No, hold on. That's not true. It didn't fit their outcome. The outcome was the goal. The moral framework was a narrative they've developed to support the outcome that they want.
Oh, Steve, does that mean that moral frameworks are something that are developed by humans and that there are good moral frameworks and that there are bad moral frameworks?
Well,
I think that's a valid
I wouldn't say
conclusion.
they're all merely developed by humans.
Not okay. They are developed by humans, but they should be influenced by other things, such as Christianity, the Bible, the tradition of Christianity, the existence of God, history. Okay, those are all factors that should go in there, but it's actually formulated in each individual's brain.
Oh,
it's actually interesting though. Scripture itself also, this is not the norm. Okay, we our current state of family and marriage is not the norm. There are times where the Bible says it's actually, you can make an inference where it's like it's better not to marry if this is the way it's going to be, and it's better not to have kids during certain times.
Didn't even Paul explicitly say that there are certain cases where it's better not to marry? I think that was Paul.
Yeah, but that's if you can't control yourself. But
okay. Well, but so
the problem is that there's so many problems. Yes, I want people to generally rule, get married and have kids. Sometimes it's just not feasible, and just saying, well, God's going to take care of you no matter what, just ain't always going to fly.
Well, God isn't just going to take care of you no matter what. That's that prosperity
He will,
gospel.
But
bullshit.
you might have to go through some bullshit. You might have to go through a lot of bullshit because you
right.
made
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
They are assuming that it's like God will prevent, just by doing this moral thing that they've set up, God will prevent any mishap from befalling you.
Yeah, look what happened to me.
You're right, exactly.
We as Americans,
I'm by no means the only case. Look at Steve here too.
Yeah,
we as Americans have this irrational, and I'm saying irrational, belief in inalienable rights, which were gifted to us from our Creator. Do they exist? I've come to the conclusion, no, they don't exist, because God never enforces your rights. If they were really yours and they were established by Him, rights are made by propagated by enforcement. God does not enforce rights. So how do we even know they exist?
I'll tell you. Well, we are endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights called natural law, things according to nature. And what happens when you rebel against nature? He might not enforce it in your generation, but reality has a way of crashing back down on people that want to deny reality or natural law. And He will enforce them on the last day. Don't be mistaken. He will hold them accountable on the last day.
Okay, but on this world, He doesn't enforce anything. And what you're saying is consequences, are talking about consequences. The consequences are not imposed by God. The consequences, that's just what happens when you don't follow the natural law and you rebel. God doesn't have to even touch anything. He just knows where it's going to go.
Well, okay, Steve.
He has given us ministers of God called civil magistrates that ought to enforce it, but a lot of times they don't. So I'm saying, yeah, that's the ideals for them to enforce it, but a lot of times they don't, and that's reality.
Correct, because there's more to human nature than The human brain is not a purely moral machine. But Steve, you're talking about we're talking about consequences. Now, there's an interesting logic argument that I can make backwards from here. But Steve, what is the consequence of drinking too much alcohol?
Well, there's all kinds. You could wake up with a hangover. If you're out at a bar, you could get in your car and drive and run into a tree, or worse, get in an accident. You could not have any of that happen to you, just lose your license and have to pay a lot of money. Okay, you don't do any of that. You just drink and you damage your liver. Or you lose motivation, or you become dependent on it. Or you could be an angry drunk and
get sent to jail.
Drink. Sent to jail. You could do some DV against a wife. But on the other hand, alcohol in itself is not bad. I mean, you can have a glass of wine.
Cheers.
and the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, it's celebrated with bread and wine. No, not bread and grape juice. It's actually bread and wine, which is alcohol.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Yes.
Not that feminist trash, but bread and grape juice. That's feminist trash.
Does God need to impose those consequences on us, or does the order he created impose those consequences on us?
It's obviously the order he created. You create the consequence. You actually create the consequences that you're going to suffer from. Not God. God didn't do it.
So God sets up a world with rules. The universe follows those rules immutably. We try to violate those rules every day, all the time, and we suffer the consequences.
Genesis 3.
Right. And we suffer the consequences of trying to violate the rules of the universe.
Yeah, we rebelled against God and his created order.
So, Steve, you said something else that I want to dive into. We were talking about how humans create moralities. I've been involved in a couple of conversations, both online and off, about this, and it's actually come up in my research that somewhere between 50 to 70% of people have no internal monologue. They don't think.
Okay, for the 50 to 70% of people that don't have an internal monologue, could you describe what an internal monologue is?
Sure. So an internal monologue is when you talk to yourself inside your head and you're thinking, you are discussing a problem. Like I can actually literally hear myself think frequently. Not all of my thought is verbal thought, right? I do abstract work with really cool graphs, stuff like that. But there is an internal train of thought. There's an internal it's me talking to myself. I know people are going to say, "Oh, that makes you crazy." Actually, no. What it actually probably means, and people really, really, really don't want to study this, is you probably have an IQ 1 standard deviation above normal, is what it probably actually means.
So I have a problem. I'll get a coffee somewhere, and I'm reading a book, and then I'll be staring off, and then I'll move my hands like analyzing an argument, with my hands, and people look at me like I'm effing crazy, right?
I know exactly what you mean. Exactly what you mean.
No, let me use this. let me use just a simple, understandable story of an internal monologue. I'm going across town. I know that there's multiple routes. So I get to the stop sign or a stoplight. I could go straight here, or I could turn left. Wait, if I turn left, I'm gonna have to go down this way. Oh, it's 3:00. School's letting out. Oh, there's gonna be traffic down there, and oh, there's a detour there. Blah blah blah. And no, I'm not gonna go that way. I'm gonna go this way. Yeah, it's a mile longer, but there's not gonna be so much traffic, and yeah, I'll get there faster. Okay, that's thinking. Should I do this? Should I do that? What are the consequences? What will I encounter? That. And you do that quickly, that internal dialogue, and then you make your choice. Is that what you mean by an internal dialogue? On a very simplistic level.
On a fairly simplistic level, yes. And okay, Shu, you brought up an interesting point. Owen Benjamin says he doesn't have an internal monologue. He never stops rambling. Well, there's an interesting thing about people who don't have an internal monologue. All of their thought occurs externally. Okay? So when you are talking to somebody like Owen Benjamin, and they're just sitting there nonstop verbalizing, they are literally working out the problem in front of you. And they're trying desperately because they haven't thought about it yet. A person without an internal monologue can only react. Now,
does this have implications about women? Haven't you talked to women and they just ramble and blah, 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 and they're talking in circles? Where the hell is this going? And you're trying to follow them, and you just go, oh man, I have no idea. She just talks around in circles, and then all of a sudden, click, oh, I'm going to do this. What?
Yeah, that makes me need one of these.
What, are you saying you've experienced that, Nick?
Oh, fuck. Excuse me, I shouldn't have said it. Damn it. Should have said that either.
Too late, Nick.
I know. Didn't have enough internal monologue for that one.
Well, and just because you have an internal monologue doesn't mean you're good at filtering your internal monologue.
Oh, man. But yeah, that happens a lot. I just wonder, do these... Not every woman is like this, right? But
no,
so many of them are, but there's not... Maybe that's part of my problem is I have two very high IQ sisters. I come from everybody in my family is generally pretty smart. So when I interact with other women that aren't family members like that, they have no internal monologue. They don't reflect on what they're saying. They're not constantly analyzing the argument, analyzing motive, analyzing this. They're just blah blah blah.
Well,
blah,
Nick,
blah, blah.
Nick, okay,
they're regurgitating their feelings.
I gave the answer to that question because what I said is in people with an internal monologue, if you just look at the raw statistics, it happens to map very, very closely to the number of people with an IQ of 1 standard deviation above mean. Okay. About 30% of the population has an IQ above 115. Okay. So, or no, it's
Know that how many are
110.
women?
Well,
how many are women?
Remember, the IQ curve is for women is leptokurtic. They tend to cluster more around the mean than men do. So yes, there will be fewer women at the right tail, the high end of the
threshold
curve
of whatever it is, 110, 115. Yeah. I mean, we don't know exactly what the threshold is.
Not a lot of studies been done on this
in that region.
Right. So there are fewer women who are above that threshold. And that's just the way things are. That doesn't mean that all women are below that threshold.
Well,
just means that there's more women who are below that threshold than men.
there's more women around with average IQ than men.
Yes, there are. Absolutely. It also means that there's
I mean, that's an imprecise way of thinking it. Women are more clustered around the average. Their cluster is tighter. Remember, it's a bell curve. It's a taller bell curve, which means there's more at the average and more close to the average. Men's average is wider.
Correct.
So when I talk about this, I'm actually envisioning two different bell curves superimposed. One taller and one shorter but fatter.
Correct.
But not that again is something most people don't do. I mean, it's just natural. Oh, when I'm talking about a concept, I may develop a mental chart and refer to that, and I'm kind of seeing it in my mind.
Yeah, that's what I do.
But no, not everybody does that. Or can do that.
Well, and again, there hasn't been a lot of studies done on this because it's kind of a taboo subject. But if you look at the people around you, you will see that a lot of them are sitting there doing that in front of you externally. Okay. And there's a good reason for that. And that is an internal monologue requires high levels of abstract thinking. I mean, you literally are doing everything in the abstract inside your mind. And abstract thinking is highly correlated with high IQ.
But abstract thinking is immaterial.
Indeed it is.
Oh, Bonson, there you go.
Bonson strikes again. So, okay. Steve, you weren't around in the pre-show, so I made more notes last night.
Obviously, this is going better than our pre-show last night.
And there was something that I really wanted to touch on towards the end of this. Now that we've kind of built a platform for not just the validity of morality, but the necessity of morality, and not just the necessity of morality, but the inevitability of it. The physics demands it. Okay. And there's a reason we've been talking about IQ a little bit, because some very well-known people in the red pill like to say that people need to be told what to think about something. And they say it like it's a bad thing, right? They always say it in this context of, I shouldn't have to tell people what to think. They should just know. Okay.
Well, some things they know innately by natural law, but yeah, they don't always abstractly think. And therefore they need to be told what to do.
Okay. But inference requires abstract thought. It requires me to be able to see. So a person who cannot do abstract thought would say, oh, the electron was there, and then now the electron is over here. The abstraction is, oh, the electron had to move between measurements. Okay. So in terms of thought processes and morality, one of the greatest things that Christianity brought to humanity was an organization that told people how to think about things. Because most people cannot generate pro-social frameworks on their own. Everyone can generate, every person of an IQ above drooling can generate a framework that says, this is good for me, I will take. Okay. Any person with a pulse can, okay. And
basically animalistic instinct still can say, oh, this is good for me, basically.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
Okay.
The the average IQ does not have enough horsepower to generate pro-social, pro-society, pro-civilizational sets of rules, sets of a frame of heuristics about, like, it's the old meme where, the guy sticks the stick in his own bicycle rim and then falls over the bicycle rim and blames it on somebody else, right?
Oh, you mean there's a need for intellectual hierarchy? Oh, you mean that exists and that
Yes,
institutions used to reflect that,
correct. And so
or good for civilization? Oh,
what the
interesting.
church did is the church developed a set of very pro-social, pro-natural law, moral heuristics, and said, we can see that these moral heuristics produce better outcomes. And then they went to people, they built these churches, in some cases very beautiful churches. I have seen some of the old world cathedrals in Spain, and oh, guys, if you haven't seen that, it's worth the trip. Okay. And then they brought people in, and then they educated them on why it was so important to follow these rules, even if they themselves did not know or were not capable of understanding why. So when you say, oh, well, people need to be told what to think about something, yes, they do. That is normal, and that is good. It is good to tell people what to think about something.
Okay. But just think, specifically the Catholic Church. The criticism of the old Catholic Church. Yes, they just imposed, their rules on the people. And they told the people what to think. They didn't let them read the Bible themselves. Well,
it's not always true.
And they chained the Bible to the pulpit or wherever. Yeah, they did, because they didn't have a printing press, and that cost a year's worth of wages. Therefore, if it's available to everybody, we better chain it down, because there were thieves back then. But back to in the Bible, doesn't it equate the people to sheep?
Yeah.
Are sheep highly intelligent creatures, or do sheep need to be guided, protected, and kind of told what to do, and then have somebody to follow? Sheep follow. Sheep don't think. So isn't there an analogy here? And as Plutarch said, yeah, kind of most people need to be told what to think, and then, educated why that's true. But you know what? Okay, you're going to have to do something. Hey, you people out there, you're going to have to live your lives a certain way. Now, I've done the thinking for you, the pros and cons, and what works out best. So trust me, follow me, do as I say. And it's maybe a bit of a generalization, but people are like sheep. Most people are like sheep. Most people are not leaders. Most people, when they do their own thing, are making bad decisions.
Well, so the sheep outsource the thinking to the shepherd, and that is good for the sheep. And the sheep know that. Shu actually brought up a fantastic question, and I'm going to make a bit of a controversial statement on it. But then that leads me to question if all people have the same degree of free will. I don't know. And the answer is no, they do not all have the same degree of free will. They all have the same degree of freedom of action, as in they can all choose to do things, right? But if you are a person
they're naturally limited. Are you saying they're naturally limited by being able to analyze things according to their intellect and make decisions based upon those things?
Correct.
Okay.
So people who react, who can only react to outside stimuli, do not have the same degree of free will as somebody who can take the stimuli in, analyze it, and say, you know what? My reaction is this, but instead I'm going to do this other thing over here because that is going to be actually beneficial. Go ahead, Nick.
No, this is first thing I'm going to. Steve will agree with this. Second thing, Steve might agree with it. I don't know. A little pushback, but
Okay.
probably not too much. Women, right? There's a reason. Not only are they barred because of they're barred because of their nature in creation, but also because of the fall. And what do women tend to think of? What do women do, even though they might have a little higher intellect, or they still act according to their female nature? I'm not saying female nature is bad. They're just not designed to lead. And their intellectual or the way they interact with arguments, you see, is more sociological and more about fitting in and mothering and not necessarily giving people the hard truth. Also, secondly, so that's a good natural reason to preclude them. Also preclude unintelligent men. And that's where the second thing gets into is, man, the Catholic Church, there might not have had been so much of a need for reformation if all these supposedly intellectual bishops didn't just want to collect their money and put unintelligent and not well educated priests in their place. There was an abuse of the system. And I think they did correct that in the Council of Trent to some extent. But hey, maybe they should have a good translation in their own language, like the without getting away from teachers. You still need teachers. I mean, God ordained teachers, even in the Old Testament and New Testament. But hey, maybe they should be able to have the letter read in their own language so they can understand it. And they do that today. Well, they do that today. So,
Right. Yeah. Read the gospel in the vernacular, in the language of the people. If you kept it to Latin, of course, back then more people knew Latin.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there's merit to that. But the reason for the Reformation was primarily, they had to build St. Peter's Basilica. That took a lot of money. So they needed to raise funds for that. So how about if we sell some indulgences? It'll fill the coffers. So that decision was at the top. But then, if you're gathering money at the lower level and you skim a little bit off, you can still pass money up the line. There was a lot of skimming going on.
Well, and I want to point out here that just because somebody is smart does not automatically mean they're more moral than the lower, than the lesser IQs. No, that has not been ever shown. So Shu has a follow-up question that I think is also relevant. And God would expect more from someone with 125 IQ than a 95 IQ, right?
Yeah,
Yes, he would.
There are Bible passages about that to people who have more blessings, more is given to them, much is expected in return.
Exactly.
We know that
you have a greater judgment if you're a pastor.
As an example, we're talking about culpability for doing wrong. First-degree murder. That's forethought. You're planning. You're thinking. The penalty is much greater than manslaughter. Both end up with a dead person, but there are higher culpability, responsibility that comes with thought, thinking it through. Therefore, if you're gifted with a higher intelligence, you're able to understand things more. And you're responsible. You're more responsible. If, as head of a household, the husband, and you're telling, properly commanding or leading your wife. Okay, same word. Oh, you don't like that word commanding, but yeah, telling her what to do. Guess what? You are now also responsible for what you told her to do. She's not. She has much, much less responsibility, if any, because she's following the commandment to obey her husband. Well, her oath, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, Steve, it's interesting because there has been studies done on this. People with higher IQs commit crime at far less rates, and that nonviolent crime, violent crime, all crime. The higher your IQ, the less likely you are to commit crime. And the empiricists will say, well, that's because the higher IQ don't need to commit crime. Oh, no. The higher IQ are still quite capable of committing crime. And they do. They just don't commit crime at the same rates as lower IQ. The vast majority of criminal, like a banker steals millions of dollars from the bank. Yeah, he had to leverage some pretty high IQ to do that. But also banks are designed with lots of systems to make that really hard to do. And so and most people in the banks are already, they're already earning up to their IQ potential. So it hurts them more. And they can kind of think about it and go, yeah, I could steal the money from the bank, but then I lose my job at the bank in the potential future. And, I might go to jail. In fact, I probably will go to jail. It's not to say that IQ is some sort of defense, but the statistics are absolutely clear. The higher IQ, the less likely you are to commit a crime.
Maybe it's because I got that internal monologue going on. And I thought through the consequences. Where could this
Yes.
lead? Nah, I don't think I want to do that.
So, but what do you do for the people who do not have that inner monologue? Well, the only way to order a society is for the people who can create codes of morality to give them to the people who can't.
Well, democracy sucks.
Yeah, it's
yeah. There's a hierarchy.
Democracy has its hierarchies to it, and our current one actually has a hierarchy to it, and with reason. But my point is, look, it's not the fault of the people who, with a rocking a 90 IQ that they didn't win the IQ lottery. You can't blame this on them, right? And here's the thing. There's a lot more of them than there are you. Okay?
Again, there's a natural hierarchy.
Right. And so
however you want to slice it, there's a natural, our system should reflect a natural hierarchy because it's built into the order of the universe.
Exactly. And so we have to figure out how to work with these people. Okay. We have to figure out how to order a society with them. Because look, the eugenicists will come in and say, oh, well, you just kill them at birth. Okay. All you've done is shift the curve. Congratulations, you moron. You haven't won anything. And you've murdered countless.
And you have no people to work. You have no people to do work.
Exactly. So all you've done is cut your nose off in spite of your face. Congratulations. That's what we call a midwit answer, right? That is that 110 IQ answer says, oh, well, clearly, if we can't order society, if they can't handle it, then we should just get rid of them because they can't handle it. Okay. That's 110 IQ answer right there. The 140 IQ answer is to figure out how to design a system of moral codes, of legal codes for them to live by. And what that means is you don't have to justify the morality to them, but it helps. You do have to explain it to them. And you have to tell them what the consequences of violating that moral code or that legal code are. Now, some of them are going to anyway. Okay, so now you have to have enforcement mechanisms. Obviously, we have police to enforce the law. And the police, I know the police can get corrupted, and we did
Color of law.
Yeah, the color of law. That was our second ever episode. But I'm describing kind of an ideal system here. But the point is that
hold on. There's a problem here.
Okay.
The implications of this is everybody shouldn't go to college.
Absolutely.
And you know what? That's what all the guidance counselors are advocating. Everybody should go to college. Yes, we'll have a society of everybody being educated. Then they can all have office jobs because they pay the best. Okay, who's going to do the work?
Who's going to build the damn office? Seriously, who's going to build the office? There just aren't enough people to do all of the high IQ work that we need done because there just aren't that many people of sufficient IQ. And killing the lower edge of end of the IQ isn't going to change that. All you do is make all of your other problems worse. Okay.
And credentials do not replace intelligence.
Well, one of the things that we're circling around here is that this unraveling of society that we've been talking about it for a year on this channel, it is inextricably linked to the destruction of morality. You cannot have an ordered, successful, functioning, growing society, civilization, without codes of morality. Those codes of morality are the engine by which your civilization can grow. Okay? These are necessary things. They are good things. It is good to tell people what to think about something.
You're not, there's a word you're not using here. Hierarchy.
I used it.
As our society has embraced more and more equality, we have forgotten hierarchy. And without hierarchy, morality has also gone away. And not everybody is capable or should be tasked with making their own decisions. And if everybody gets a vote to decide, you know what? A lot of those people really don't have the capacity to do that. And so,
hello, Dabney.
On a average basis, your actual decisions are being made at an average lower IQ level, because if the lower IQ people, I'm paraphrasing here, they get as much a say as the smarter people, there's more of them. So obviously your decisions are going to be dumber.
They have to be. That's
we
cause and
got a
effect.
comment got a comment here. I would say yes.
There's limits here, though, because IQ is a heritable trait. It's not entirely heritable. So let's say that we say that Einstein's IQ was 160. That's about roughly where they put it. Could he have been born of two parents with 140 IQ? Yeah. Okay. There's variability there. He was not born to two parents of 90 IQ. There's
not
limits.
Impossible, but statistically highly, highly improbable.
Yeah, you won't catch me placing any money on that.
Yeah, I'm not going to put any money on it. So this comes down to the nature versus nurture. I don't remember what the studies are, but
we did a topic on this.
I think
we did.
Am I right that about half your potential, well, maybe half to 80% of your potential is based on nature? The other 20% is nurture, your experience, your upbringing. It's
Yeah,
it's a mix.
it's something like that. Because you're the environment you're raised in does matter. Like if you have a high natural IQ, but you don't get a good foundational education, you're going to struggle to utilize it. Okay, and you're going to spend a lot more of your. So we've said before on this channel that IQ is kind of like an accelerator in a car, right? The more it allows me to get from point A to point B quicker. Well, if you don't have a strong foundational education, you're going to spend a lot more time working out and the individual steps. You're going to spend a lot more time trying things that maybe you couldn't foresee. Like it's not all nature and it's not all nurture. Right now, we live in a society that feminism, by the way, and our school system is all structured around the idea that everything required to make geniuses is nurture, that there is no nature.
Oh.
Right? Yeah, no, I agree with you, Nick. But that's how our current society is structured, and that experiment has been a complete and utter failure. And we need to accept that and move on to something that is a little more balanced along the lines of what's the percentages that Steve was talking about. But we also know that the health of the parents at conception matters. So clearly there's an environmental aspect there. But also, yeah, there's a reason why the kings were kings. They actually tended to be more intelligent. And now we can have inbreeding and all of that. Hey, consequences again. Again, what we're trying to say is that yes, there's nuance here, but on balance, IQ is a heritable trait. So, kind of where I wanted to end this was, and I've had this conversation with people offline before, and I don't know if I've ever actually said it, but one of the things that the red pill specifically and the conservative right in general has done they have ceded the moral high ground to people who would destroy the world, and they did so on the theory that a principled amorality beats an evil morality. And we don't name names here, but I have had this conversation with people in the red pill, and no one's had a good response for why a principled amorality is superior on the basis of the evidence presented. Because let's be honest, when we walk away from taking a principled moral stance, we gave over the entire space of morality to these trans the kids lunatics, because we offered no morality to counter them. We said, oh, well, no, we are principled. We stand by our amorality. We have no moral system. And they went, congratulations, retards. We are going to take over the moral high ground, and we are going to beat you with it. I don't like the trans the kids morality, but it is absolutely amorality. I think it's pure evil, but there are such thing as evil moral systems.
And the red pill is good. It gives the truth. And evading morality, you are ceding, as Plutarch said, you're ceding the high ground when you could actually make a great stand against everyone else. And guess what? Traditional Christians, not tradcons. I mean, like ancient Christianity, the reformers, medieval theologians, real Christianity, not the made up egalitarian bullcrap that's called tradcons. You would have a moral high ground. You'd have an audience that could soak up these truths and apply it to their lives. But instead, you're floating amorality and boats and hoes.
And then wondering why
So-
people don't want to stick around.
Yep.
I want to say something here. We have been critical of some of Rollo's views here. We've had some fun with him and provided counter arguments to them. But I want to actually compliment Rollo for something he said in his Sunday stream, which illustrates this point perfectly. He talked about microchimerism. That is where the DNA, believe it or not, and I knew this, when you have sexual intercourse with a woman and leave your seed inside of her, some of that DNA stays there forever. And it becomes part of her. And it actually goes in her bloodstream and up to her brain. Yes. And so the more partners she's had, the more foreign other men DNA in her system. This is why promiscuity is bad. And there's also some studies, and I learned this by listening to Vicky Thorne. She's dead now, but a Catholic nurse. Her ministry was in abortions, but very intelligent woman. She talks about microchimerism. And this was, 15, 20 years ago. Actually, the younger children have DNA of their older siblings within them. There is a lot more we don't know about the reproductive world and sexuality, because we don't dare study this. You know what? They do not want you, the general public, to know about microchimerism. Or that, you plant your seed, and it's there. So, okay, I think everyone would agree that promiscuity is immoral. Yeah, okay. Now, here's a reason why. And therefore, you know what? As a man, it's not good for you to leave your seed floating around in some other woman's body. And as a woman, it's not good for you to accept the seed or DNA of a whole bunch of different men before you get married. Yes, it matters. That's why morality matters. And morality matters even if you don't know about it.
Well, Steve, it's fascinating you brought this up. So microchimerism, it is an actual thing. That's a biological term. Now, let's talk a little bit about natural law and consequences. We in the Red Pill have a term for microchimerism, but our term is based on our observation of the women. We call it the 1,000-cock stare. Okay. The 1,000-cock stare is the biological representation of a woman who has had lots of men DNA floating around in her. Okay. All that DNA means she can, basically it's dilution. She can't bond with any other man because she's got 1,000 other men in her. Okay. You're just another 1/1000th of what's floating around in her. I don't know that that's the actual biology, but there's a reason why the 1,000-cock stare is a thing. That is the representation of this. And so in the Red Pill, we recognize that when we go, yeah, she's got the 1,000-cock stare, right?
So they're actually thinking about morality when they mention that. They're using that, and yet they claim that these ideas are amoral. No, you actually made a moral judgment based on your observations. So, yeah,
correct.
You can't claim it's amoral any longer.
True. I'm not going to take it that far, but it's very difficult for me to use biology to disprove to say no here. If you know what I mean. For those of you listening along, so the question is, I'm quasi LGBTQ. If I sleep with a defiled woman, well,
I
you're
wouldn't go that far. Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't go that far, but you're certainly sharing.
Mhm.
You're sharing the same hotel room.
And the thing is, there's a lot of men that don't know that. Women hide their numbers. So whatever number you think you might be
Oh,
getting, you might
really?
not get it. Yeah.
Well, okay, but Nick, why do women hide their numbers?
Oh, it actually matters, and they know it matters internally, but they act like it doesn't.
Oh, you mean women have a moral interpretation of their numbers? What?
Well, now they try to get away from the shame, and now they promote
Oh.
these people getting 100 guys in a night or something. Just
Why are they doing that?
oh,
Why they are doing that with the express purpose of trying to destroy the morality. It is demoralization. Going back to our prior what was what? That was 3 episodes now on morality bubbles and demoralization. They need you to not even know that there might be a moral consequence. They need women to not even know that there might be a physical consequence. And so they have to remove any moral barrier that you might have received over the course of your life. Say you accidentally walked into a church one day. Even that they have to remove, because they cannot tolerate the idea that there is a consequence for doing this. Lily Phillips is a wreck. Like she is worthless. I don't care how good you think she looks. She is worthless.
Yeah. And it's what's even sadder than her is all the men that were lined up to participate in that travesty. Oh my God. Ugh. I'm more disgusted by the man than by her. Why would you stick your dick in that? Really?
Demoralization.
Oh, man.
Demoralization. We have to convince the women that it's okay, and we have to convince the men that there's no consequence to it either. Although I recently heard that she got a bunch of people sick, so so like, oh, you mean there's but you have to. This is what demoralization doesn't happen by trying to root out the morals first. It happens by trying to claim that there is no consequence. Because if there's no consequence to anything, well, we don't need a system of heuristics to determine what the consequences might be. Do we?
just matter and space, time and
Right.
Yeah.
time, matter and space, atoms colliding, fizzing at certain given time, speed, temperature. There is no God. The universe doesn't care, right?
Maybe. On the other hand, back to Rollo, you can do moral good without claiming you're doing moral good. Rollo is working towards a moral good, helping to educate men about women, helping to improve their lives. And he, Rollo is not all about promoting promiscuity. He actually said, yeah, it's probably not such a good idea. So, he's an ally. He's working towards the same overall good that we are, educating men, helping men live better lives with women, with their families, with their personal lives. So no, Absolutely not. We are not opposed to him in any way. It's just, this is how men operate. We're going to debate each other. We're going to criticize each other. My best friend is going to call me out when I'm a little bit off track. Hey, this is the way men operate.
And it's okay. And it's good. It is good for men to do this. In fact, it's the only way that civilization can survive the chaos. So, when we offer up a criticism of anything, and we've offered up a lot of criticism, we are not offering it up in this spirit of we want to attack you. We don't care about clout. We've all decided that we're not going to monetize this channel ever. So okay, we're not doing it for that. But each and every one of us here, and I know you guys in the chat too, we are here because we recognize that the world is unraveling. It is falling apart. Now, we're not going to say that, we're going to be the ones to stop it. But what we are saying, and particularly in this show tonight, is it is necessary for there to be a moral order placed on this civilization. You cannot escape it. Because if you don't place one, somebody else or something else will. We're here because we want to have a seat at the table of the conversation of what that moral order looks like. And we want to start having conversations with other men, other groups, maybe people who we don't agree with them exactly on their moral frameworks. But as Steve said, Rollo, he's working towards the same goal we are. We'll work with that. As Nick said a long time ago, no enemies to the right. If you're helping, you're not an enemy. That doesn't mean we won't have spirited debates with you. We will. But yeah, we're not interested in debate for the sake of debate. But the reason I think we keep coming back to this morality thing is because there is so little of it anymore in society that we even have to go to the effort of explaining why a moral system might be useful and valuable. And what I was saying right at the end of the show is, look, okay, in the name of trying to chase after this principled amorality, so that everyone has the opportunity to develop their own frameworks, we have ceded the moral high ground to people with an absolute evil morality. And they make no attempt to hide their morality. They don't think it's evil because nobody thinks their morality is evil, but they make no attempt to hide that that's what they're doing. They make no attempt to say, "Oh, well, we're amoral." No, the left lives on moral systems. It's how they enforce. How do you think the left has? Well, how do you think the left has been able to weaponize groups of people who clearly are not capable of coming up with this stuff on their own? Because the left presents them with a morality, and the left presents them with a justification and an explanation for why their morality is good. And then we sit over here and we go, oh, well, no, we can't do that. All we do is present information. Yeah. What a bunch of fucking losers we are. And I mean losers literally. We lose.
Yep. Well, I said this in the last zone. It's what Edinburgh's dictum.
The only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing.
Pretty much.
I might be a paraphrase of it, but that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's essentially it.
And here and again, men come to the red pill and they see us promoting this loser mentality, and they go, well, you're a loser. Now you make a big stink about how you're a strong alpha male, but you lose so goddamned always. Why should I stick around with you? Principled amorality has been a failed experiment. We gave it a go. It didn't work. Time to let go, and it's time to stop fucking losing.
Stop reasoning like a child.
Yes, please. You can. I want to defeat the left and drive them before me and hear the lamentations of their women. I am not comfortable with a managed decline. Fuck that noise.
So if we don't take the moral high ground, we leave it vacant. And then the forces opposing us will take the higher moral ground, and we will have to leave Pickett's charge
Yep.
up Seminary Ridge, and we're going to get mowed down.
Yes, we will.
I like that reference.
You would, Nick. You would. Steve, did you put that in there just for Nick?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, if only he had his Stonewall Jackson, but he didn't.
Steve and I enjoy tickling Nick's historical bone over there. His historical proclivities.
Yes.
So, I don't know, guys. Do you have anything else to say on this?
I got a little slide to show. It's a 5-minute clip. Just kind of summarize some of the opposing thinking. I presented it to you guys last night. I might not be able to hear it, so I'll share the screen anyways and hope I can hear it, but I listened to it right before the show. Here we go. There you go. Another Bonson. It's about 5 minutes long.
It's not up yet, Nick.
Nah, he's hitting the right cue, I think.
Proving
Can
something
you hear
from
it?
the impossibility of the contrary. I've
Yeah.
looked at his presuppositions and
Good.
shown
I
that they
can't. Good.
violate
Okay.
the conditions of rationality and shown that the Christian theistic view does not. He could not offer a rational warrant for the uniformity of nature or the inductive principle. And so he has left all scientific inference, all of our daily experience, our learning, memory, our study of the past, and even our use of language unintelligible. His worldview doesn't make intelligible what he's been trying to do tonight in reasoning and arguing. In fact, he's even engaged in the just egregious self-contradiction in his theory of knowledge that we only know things on the basis of empirical experience, and that he's made all sorts of claims that have nothing to do with empirical experience, including the claim that we only know things based on empirical experience. He couldn't defend his ready appeal to moral absolutes. He couldn't show why he wasn't being arbitrary when he condemns one thing and condones another thing. My opponent never explained how atheism allows that humans have more dignity than snails or dogs, how love is anything more than some kind of, indigestion that you feel, how life could arise from non-life. He had no answer that accounts for laws and concepts and rationality. He simply couldn't cogently answer the challenges that were given to him. On the other hand, the proof of God's existence is that without him, you cannot prove anything at all, whether in science or ethics or just ordinary human experience. You can't make sense of or offer rational evidence for the inescapable assumption of uniformity, which atheism violates. That assumption is foundational to all thinking and all reasoning. You can't coherently assert any kind of moral evaluation or judgment if people are nothing more but molecules in motion. And so we found tonight that atheists are uncomfortable with the need for being tough-minded in philosophy. I know that they can be ridiculing us, and I'm certainly sorry when any kind of debate, comes down to that, even if I have engaged in that. But tough-minded philosophical thinking has just not been found in the case that he's tried to offer. Atheists thoughtlessly profess, and they are emotionally committed to an underlying worldview that happens to render the reasoning, science, and ethics they want to do unintelligible. If atheists were consistent with their uncritical, fundamental beliefs about the nature of reality, they aren't, of course, but if they were consistent, they couldn't make sense of what we all take for granted, from toothpaste to the planets. So contrary to their professed theoretical presuppositions and actual practice in the real world, in debates before real university audiences, atheists pretend that there's uniformity in nature, that they can appeal to the absolutes of ethics. But on atheist presuppositions, you can't intelligently account for reasoning or discourse or debate at all. What I'm saying here simply is that Mr. Tabish is a living contradiction. He cannot account for his fundamental convictions about the world, about life, and about how we know what we know. Indeed, it's evident that he's not even thought seriously and critically about such matters, because he just wanders into self-contradiction when he starts talking about these basic matters. He's indulged in reasoning, which is really, and I don't mean this personally, pathetic for its arbitrariness and its contradictory character, for its unproven, emotion-driven pronouncements. Basically, a line of thinking which violates the fundamental criteria of rationality. The atheist is satisfied to ignore the need for intellectual justification and explanation, the need to gain consistency within his total beliefs, and the need to demonstrate systematic cogency in his overall perspective on the world, man, and values. And in this light, atheism, for all its proud boast of scholarly adequacy, is a kind of intellectual adolescence which refuses to think hard, face the facts, and be tough-minded. Atheists live, when all is said and done, and you push them, by blind and contradictory faith about how we know what we know and what the nature of reality is. Atheism is arbitrary and irrational, all the while dressing up in the costume of rationality. Philosophically speaking, it's really much closer to superstition, undisciplined reflection, and wishful thinking than to science. No wonder the scripture says that it's the fool who says in his heart there is no God. Paul says, professing themselves to be wise, those who are unbelievers, they became fools. That is not name calling. That's a description of what happens to your reasoning when you will not admit the obvious. Mr. Tabish is in a lot of company, but the fact that there are a lot of people who do that sort of thing doesn't make his thinking any less superstitious or arbitrary. He is simply taking his intellectual autonomy for granted.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
I like the way he ended that, taking their intellectual autonomy for granted.
That is at root of the amorality claim of the so-called red pill. It's complete bullshit.
It's illogical. It's irrational, as he said.
Yes.
And it's inherently destructive. And I think that is the thing that is really that people are reacting to today. People hunger for a morality. They hunger for somebody to tell them what to think about something, because they have, particularly Gen Z and even younger millennials, they have grown up in a world where even the churches preach this "you do you, boo boo."
Amorality is ineffective, counterproductive, and it will lead nowhere.
It will lead to destruction.
Well, yeah, okay. Exactly. So let's embrace the morality. Let's make it a part. It should be part of Christianity. Let me explain that. If the red pill observations of intersexual dynamics, the nature of women, are true, makes them a moral good. It makes them consistent with Christianity, historical Christianity, what's talked about in the Bible. And we have gone into that many times. So instead of running from that as red pill guys, no, we need to embrace the morality of the red pill. And if that brings us closer as a group to Christianity, maybe the red pill is the reformation to the Christian churches that is needed.
That would explain why the churches, generally speaking, not all of them, have such a visceral negative reaction to the red pill. That which is corrupt does not wish to be reformed.
Right. And that's why they're also resisting hierarchy, they're resisting patriarchy, they're resisting natural law now in the church. That is one of the biggest fights in the church right now, and people are getting canceled, fired, left and right.
What we said somewhere else that the truth is everywhere. You cannot suppress or hide the truth. And if you try to suppress it in one place, the truth will come out somewhere else. And as the church has doubled down on suppressing the truth of the red pill, the awareness of men of the truth that the red pill brings to light has only grown. Rollo did a podcast a couple weeks ago where he noted the red pill is mainstream now. Gee.
Yeah, I was at a conference. It was a Right Response Ministries, Joel Webbins Crisis King conference, and the amount of guys there that were patriarchal, but also I found out a lot of them were avid Dow Rock readers. It blew my mind.
Interesting.
And it's not easy to be a Dalrock reader now, because it's not on the normal internet. You have to go to the archives to find it. So that means they had to take an effort to go there. They had to seek it out.
Well, Steve, what did I say earlier about Zoomers and millennials? They are seeking out the truth. They are crying out for somebody to tell them what to think about things. And Dowrock did. And oh, look, they found it. They found it despite the best efforts of people to memory hole it.
Yes, it's very true.
You cannot suppress the truth. And because you cannot suppress the truth, you cannot suppress the moralities that spring up like weeds around the truth.
There's a cloud of witness. You may suppress the truth in unrighteousness, as Romans 1, but you're given over to a debased mind. You have to close your eyes to everything around you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a form of irrationality.
I was talking with somebody on Twitter, and they were asking, well, can you does a human exist without we were talking about AI, without prompts, and they likened it to sensory input. And I said, yes, you can do that. It's called sensory deprivation torture. And if you do sensory deprivation to somebody long enough, they go insane. Okay. When you cut yourself off from the reality around you, you literally go insane. I mean, just we can always talk about the left, of course, but don't get me started on the tradcons. They do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the tradcons in some regards are worse because they do the same thing, but they put on the cloak of moral righteousness while they're doing it. Yeah, we don't have a lot of love for the tradcons around here.
We don't.
But
because they're neither traditional nor conservative, even though they use that garb.
They just LARP it. It's just a LARP for them. It's a costume that they wear, or as Steve likes to say, it's a mask that they wear. It's very feminine thinking, clearly. So that that's about what I have to say. I don't know, Nick. Do you have anything else to say? You also had lots of notes.
That's pretty much what I had to say. Remember, to seek truth is moral, even if your purpose is immoral. Truth is good. Seeking truth is good. Every
Well said.
purpose that you have in life presumes some morality, some goal. And even how you're able to accomplish that goal reflects on how well, how good your design was to accomplish that purpose. Helping men is a moral good. So the red pill, despite some of the application, good. The real problem is they have a problem. Well, they have atheistic morality that's presumed in some of these people. They ceded the moral high ground. But also those who don't like the red pill, they have a problem with the truth. They have the problem, as Steve says, with the descriptors. The descriptors are the problem.
You have anything final thoughts, Steve?
No.
No. Okay.
So
well,
next week.
What is next week, Steve?
I want to go into geopolitical applications of this.
Of morality? What?
Yeah, well, how it relates. If you pretend you're doing well, are you doing well? If you build the most beautiful bridge in the world, and it looks great and it's modern and all that, and you used bad design, bad construction, bad rebar, bad concrete. Oh, maybe you filled the core of the bridge with styrofoam to save on concrete. Or you didn't let it cure long enough. You can build this great thing and you can build your whole society can look so unbelievably great. But what's missing? If as a country you used to make stuff that lasted for 20 years, you could buy a washing machine would last you 20 years. You bought it in 1960 and you still had it in 1980. And they still made parts for it. Wow. Now you buy stuff 5 years later. Okay, yeah, we don't support that. No parts. Better buy a new one. Isn't that morality? So let's talk about the geopolitical implications of this. And yes, it gets into the financialization of everything too.
All right. So, Steve, I guess you're leading next week, and I should probably have my
Yes.
geopolitical charts up. Okay. Well,
Might come in handy.
Yeah, it might. So this was our 1-year anniversary. We've been doing this for a year now, and we don't know if we'll keep that intro or not. There is an outro for you guys as well on the way out. We don't know if we'll be able to keep it or not, copyright being what it is and all, but we thought we'd do something fun for this episode at least. So if you like what you heard, drop a like. If you want to hear more, subscribe. We do this every Wednesday at 5:45 p.m. Pacific, 8:45 p.m. Eastern. And if you disagree with something we said, and we took some stances tonight that might be difficult, drop us a comment. We will try to answer them. All three of us do have real life considerations, time constraints. And yeah, this is the kind of stuff we do. We like to think, and we encourage thinking here. And occasionally, we also like to think on Saturdays. We'll be over on Elena's channel RP Babushka. So we'll be over there again this Saturday. No idea what's planned for that. But yeah, we will see you all next week.
See you on the flip side.
There was a firefight! Son of a bitch!